My name is William Forrest. I am an associate principal scientist within Merck Research Labs, in particular the sterile formulation sciences. And so just to give everybody a little bit more of a brief background, I have nothing to do, as my title says, with IT. So if you do have any sort of technical questions, I can direct you to my colleague who was supposed to be here, and I'm filling in for him. He is over in Prague right now. But I'm really looking forward to this and showcasing and telling you all about some of the use cases that we've been trying to look at, particularly within the laboratory setting within Merck Research Labs. And so once again, I am a scientist, and as in many industries, I'm the end user, right? And so as a scientist, and actually being in the lab, we're constantly confronted basically with this issue of functional communication and actually, being able to convey complex theories and processes in whoever my colleagues are across the world, being able to tell them from the lab what's going on. Most of the time, this, with sharing of this scientific information is done in offline meetings, whether we're doing WebEx or some sort of telepresence. Maybe you take a video from actually in the laboratory setting and you send it off through email. Most of the time it's too big because Merck's constrained our email, so you can't actually share that video. So we have to share all of this basically in the offline mode, but it would be really great is if we can do it from the laboratory setting, from the point of where we're collecting the data. Can we share those critical observations in real time? And so that's really where we began to kind of look at, could we increase efficiency within the pharmaceutical development sector by driving through remote collaboration and enhanced functional communication. And so all of you are more familiar with this probably than I am, but from the context of, once again, from the end user, as we were thinking about what immersive tech do we actually go with. We started all of this about 2 years ago, right when the Pokemon Go and all that stuff was coming out. And so, when we started to look at, well, what could we potentially use to increase the efficiency and get these efficiency gains that we were looking for? Virtual reality, while really cool, didn't really make much sense for us because we want to utilize it in the laboratory space. I need to be able to walk around. I'm carrying beakers, flask, solvent bottles, chemicals. I need to have a completely hands-free scenario. Virtual reality wasn't really going to be that tech that we were looking for. Augmented reality, obviously what a lot of people have been talking about, that overlay or the capability of overlaying digital data basically into your field of view, possibly could be something that we're really interested in. But what we really ended up settling on right about this time was the Microsoft HoloLens was coming out. And so this concept, I'm pretty sure they invented themselves, this mixed reality concept. Was that you could still take that same digital data, you could overlay it, but then you could pin it to certain places within your world. And this was really interesting concept for us because within the laboratory setting, we have many different types of equipment, whether they're analytical instruments or actually pumps or filtration units, whatnot, whatever you may have, was the concept that you could actually take a protocol or a standing operating procedure and you could pin it above that piece of equipment, and any operator, technician, or scientist that came in could effectively see that document and could make sure increase their compliance by actually having the directions right in front of them. And so also, at the same time, we were looking, around and what should we go, move forward with. And here are just several examples. And one that really, grabbed our attention was the Volvo manufacturing line, where you see the person is utilizing the HoloLens basically with the specs right in front of them for the doors, moving down the assembly line and being able to actually check off in real time that the door meets the criteria, the release criteria. And so from the pharmaceutical manufacturing sector, this is what we do all the time when we have to release batches of drug substance that actually have to go to the clinical site for the clinical trial. And so, why the pharmaceutical R&D sector? And so, if you actually look across all of the speakers and the majority of the people that are here, there's not many people from the pharmaceutical sector here. Hopefully all of you begin to jump into this space because we need a lot of help, particularly by this middle line that you see here. So what some of you may not be aware of, it takes us approximately 12 years to take a drug from its inception, so from the time that the scientist, such as myself, goes into the lab and physically makes the drug, to the time that we actually put it in a pill, a tablet, an implant, an injection, and the patient actually takes it. It takes an incredible amount of money. And so there's plenty of opportunity here where there can be efficiency gains that can speed up some of these developmental processes. And is there the possibility that one tool, whether it be AR or MR technology, that could really help drive this efficiency gain? That's kind of where we started. So we didn't just look at the HoloLens, so this is the obligatory. We did look at other things. I'm not getting paid by Microsoft under the table to push the HoloLens. We looked at, there was a lot of different pilot things going on with iPads, GoPros. The technician would wear the GoPro mounted to their chest and go around the lab. Most of those we've heard from the people before. They have their benefits, but they also have their limitations. Here we then have, at the time, once again, the HoloLens was coming out, as well as the Google Glasses were very popular. We evaluated both of them, and really, some of the other speakers hit this really well, was basically looking at functionality versus wearability. The Google Glass, while the scientists actually enjoyed it, it was far more comfortable to wear for extended period of times within the laboratory setting. A lot of them didn't really like the small field of view, particularly for reading documents, not so much for the video transmitting. If they found it very difficult to have multiple documents pulled up, so if you had a standard operating procedure as well as a batch record that were there, that wasn't really possible. So then, in a sense, that's where the HoloLens came in, where you had your expanded field of view, definitely less comfortable, but gaining functionality. And so putting this basically to the test, you look on the left here, this is what's called an on-site prep formulation. And so this is done routinely in the clinical setting, particularly for early phase clinical trials. And you can see on the left, this is actually me doing a prep. And my supervisor, I'm streaming this video through the HoloLens directly back to my supervisor, who is in her office, actually verifying, clicking off on the sheet that I'm doing the appropriate steps. But I also am able at this time to then pull up different documents, in this case, my protocol, to make sure that I'm actually doing the appropriate steps and I'm using the appropriate equipment. So in this case, I'm trying to verify that I'm using the appropriate syringe for the on-site formulation. On the right would basically be, in this sense, this GoPro view or the iPad view, where you're having someone else physically in the room videoing what's going on for confirmation that the task was actually performed properly. This becomes really, really difficult, particularly on the right, when we have these on-site formulations, which we have to do for basically every single drug that we put into the clinic. These rooms are really, really small. They're like 6 by 8 rooms. So having another person in the room with you as you're trying to actually prepare and do everything, it becomes a little bit cumbersome. So this is where the HoloLens became really beneficial. Another thing we really liked, particularly about the HoloLens at this time, was the ability to annotate. And so in this case, where my supervisor could go in or whatnot and say, hey, there's an issue here. They could confirm that, in this case, this is a suspension, that the suspension is not fully homogeneous. It needs to go back onto the vortex mixer to get things to go through. So one interesting piece here is wandering around downstairs and looking at all of the vendors now. A lot of the things that we went initially for with the HoloLens, we could probably now do with a different type of head-mounted display, particularly just this video feed back and forth. So it's really cool to see how far the technology and the hardware has come. And so, now utilizing the HoloLens, we kind of did, in a sense, another use case or a proof of concept experiment, basically with an analytical method transfer, and these go on all the time. And most of the time, these occur between multiple sites. So, for example, for Merck research labs, we have multiple sites around the US as well as over in Europe, but then we also have all of our manufacturing sites over in Europe. When you do these analytical method transfers, they have to go between basically the US and Europe. They have to go, it takes a long time to do this. There's many presentations, face-to-face meetings, people flying from site to site just to make sure and oversee that the processes are actually done correctly and the methods are actually robust enough to be transferred from the R&D site to the manufacturing site. And so in this case, for the analytical method transfer, you can see that the analysts had to go between West Point, Pennsylvania, Rahway, New Jersey, Kenilworth, New Jersey, and then Switzerland. This required a significant amount of resources flying individuals back and forth. in the sense, what we ended up doing was performing the exact same experiment utilizing the HoloLens between the 3 different sites. And it was estimated that there's a minimum 10-fold gain in efficiency just by a reduction in time. And so not even looking at cost, but just from the analyst's time. So thinking about what we had to pay that person to go over to Switzerland for 14 days versus 6 hours, effectively utilizing the HoloLens. And so other things, just some other use cases that we've been looking at that we're pretty excited about, is in a sense increasing or enhancing our external partner relations. So in this case, a lot of our vendor interactions. So in this case, we worked with Thermo Fisher Scientific, which is one of our largest analytical instrument vendors. In this case, if you look at the top where you can basically have the expert on the left, this is an Orbitrap, it's in a mass spectrometer. You can see he's basically looking at one, which is a prototype, and conveying it to the scientist that's actually in Rahway, New Jersey, and walking him through how he needs to clean the source. And so since you have kind of this expert on demand, so cutting down for actually having to schedule a service call, getting the technician out to the site, to basically tell you that you need to clean your source. And it's something that takes 5 minutes. You can cut down. The instrument's up and running, ready to go. We're not losing any time because we have a down instrument. Down in the bottom left, you'll see what we term the Merck HoloBot. So at the time, once again, this was about 2 years ago, we wanted to take the hands-free nature a little bit further. So particularly within the laboratory setting, we have to wear our personal protective equipment. So you might be wearing gloves, your lab coat, a pair of splash-resistant goggles. You might even be wearing in a sense, even more aggressive PPE, as it's called. So you wanted to basically make it voice activated. And so what our IT colleagues did was basically working with Microsoft, develop this bot service that basically you could talk to within the lab. It's a lot like that little paperclip in Microsoft Word that used to hover around there and you would ask it things. This is the exact same thing. It hovers around in your field of view. You can ask it. It then goes off and can pull an SOP for you. A standard operating procedure. It can go and pull data. Anything that you've loaded into OneDrive, it can voice activate and go and pull and automatically pull that document up into your field of view. So just adding to that hands-free. One thing that we're particularly, with the HoloLens and in utilizing the mixed reality of this fully immersive technology that we're really excited about more recently is utilizing it for molecular visualization. So particularly from my space. Is to use it to design better peptides and proteins. And so, for example, here from the remote collaboration aspect, since this is this session, we have scientists that are located in South San Francisco, Boston, London, and then Kenilworth, New Jersey, that all have to work on the design of one modality. In this case, this is Keytruda, which some of you may have heard of. And so what we're really excited about is the ability to visualize this, not only from the HoloLens, but then what you can see is we can manipulate it, we can spin it, you can do all different types of manipulation. But then one thing that we're really, really excited about is that now you can have multiple viewers all log into the exact same design scheme. And we hope that this is really going to help us, in a sense, design better products, because once again, when we apply certain stresses to a molecule and we see how they can change when we model it, it can help us design a better process going forward. And so just in closing, so everyone can get to this networking reception, the technology, as we've heard from everybody before, has a lot of advantages, particularly within the pharmaceutical R&D space. Particularly to the HoloLens, which is what we've looked at mostly so far. Hopefully, we're going to bring in some other technologies moving forward. This is a big driver in Merck Research Labs over the next year. Is we've got to change to potentially something that is less cumbersome and can be worn for longer periods of time. If you would recall from the slide that has the colony counting, which was the utilizing machine learning to basically look at the colonies of bacteria. We have a lot of individuals that they, just to give a little background, they have to look at these little petri dishes that have colonies grown on them, and they have to count them. And they might have 150 individual petri dishes that they have to count. And they sit there and they take a Sharpie and they look down at it, and they literally X off every single colony that they've seen. Well, so we gave them the opportunity with the HoloLens is that you could just basically take a picture, then it back ends and counts all the colonies for you. It takes 30 seconds. They don't want to wear the headset. They'd rather individually count 150 different plates, because messes up their hair, puts a red mark on their, on their head. They're heavy, so kind of that. So a lot of these, new technologies will be very beneficial. One thing that we're running into a lot now, particularly because we are a highly regulated environment dealing with chemicals and biological waste and materials, whatnot, is we have to be able to wear certain types of personal protective equipment. The glasses, in particular the HoloLens, are not necessarily approved PPE, so you have to wear a second pair of glasses underneath. That becomes pretty uncomfortable. We asked Microsoft if, another thing is from the sterile manufacturing perspective, which is now what I'm in, is can I actually make these sterile, in a sense, and take them into an isolation suite? So you have to wipe them down with 70% IPA. Microsoft gave us no comment, basically saying, you can try it. And I'm saying, well, I don't really want to try that on a $3,500 piece of equipment. And then as we heard some other people before is, the pharmaceutical industry is highly confidential. We have a lot of proprietary things that we do not necessarily like to share or we want to share. And so this becomes a big issue when we're talking about method transfers and moving data and documents across this. So, for example, we have a lot of standard operating procedures that sit in a server. We can recall those documents and pull them up into your field of view, but they have to basically be cycled every 14 days. And so then how, from a compliance standpoint, do you, in a sense, keep the population in the most up-to-date SOP into your headset, per se, and then make sure that it's gone from your headset 14 days later. So, with that, just need to thank some people. Once again, I wasn't supposed to be here, so thank you for everyone bearing with me. So, our IT colleagues, Prashant and Nabir. So if anybody does have questions or that are very technical, I can direct you to them. But then we have several individuals, both from Merck Research Labs Management, Analytical Sciences, our manufacturing colleague over in WAG that we actually did the method transfer with and piloted it. And then if you're interested any further, we actually wrote an article more or less about the analytical method transfer and some of the things that we would like to do in the future in Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences. So I thank you for your time.